Here we go. Recording in three, two, and one.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition. It lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It's an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
Welcome to episode 248 of Nerdery Murdering.
Big 248. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Jeffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the up, the down, the good and the bad, the nerd, and the murd. Um, it has been a busy couple weeks in between recording for me. Um, we had our first board of directors meeting, and I've been named the secretary of the board. That's busy.
Mhm.
Um, all the agendas, all the minutes, keeping everything organized. I'm the chair of the social committee, and then marketing prime numbers, writing, researching podcasts. Even through all that, I was able to golf and finish Landman, Stranger Things, and Wonder Man. I'm not sure when I sleep. Um,
Well, don't forget, we're also kind of working on an RPG based on the book.
well, I wasn't going to say that, but there it is. I wasn't ready to release that one yet, but Zig doesn't know how to
It's a
keep
ways
anything under
away.
his hat.
What
Um,
hat?
yeah, we decided we're going to attempt. So I thought it would be interesting if the RPG that the book is based on, if there was really an RPG that existed, and that just became gold to start it up and started working through that and writing it. Have the first pass of the core rule book written, now going through editing on that and everything. Got a couple of groups that are willing to be our beta testers, which is really cool. So that'll be really kind of cool if that's something we can put out there. I think that would be awesome. Zig and I talked about making our own RPG a long, long time ago. Never came to fruition, but we had always talked about how cool it would be if we were able to do our own and write our own, and trying to intentionally make the world very open, and non-rigid. I don't want to lock people into ideas. So I mean things like gears and vehicles and magic. I want that to be very open. You decide on what you're going to create. And as long as the game master approves of it, you use it. There could be a cost involved with it, of course, but I really want it to be very, very open. Um, so yeah, so there's that. On those TV shows I watched, I have I have a few comments on them. Number one, Landman, season two, spectacular, spectacular. Um, and I've said this, and I'm going to be very, very crude here right now, but I'm going to go ahead and say it like I've said it. I've told several people this. I've had to pause the show several times as we're watching it and turn to Chelsea and say, "You understand? There is no, and I mean no, amount of pussy worth dealing with her." Talking about Ali Larter's character. Uh, she's crazy. She's a great character. She's crazy.
Yeah, she's crazier than a shithouse rat.
Yeah. The addition of Sam Elliott in season two is great. His scenes are spectacular. I don't want to ruin it. I don't so don't give any details on this, but I love his physical therapist. That is a great
Mhm.
character. She's awesome. But Landman 2 was spectacular. Can't wait for season three. I believe it's already in production. Um, oh, by the way, uh the cafe that they all go to all the time,
Yeah,
that's out just west of Fort Worth.
yeah.
I looked.
Originally, it was like a gas station, and then it was like a restaurant bar, and then it closed down, and then they used it for filming. And I think they're actually making a cafe out there now. It's over
Yeah,
by Margie's Italian Gardens,
yeah, yeah.
which is
I
getting
saw
a
it. I found
renaissance.
I found it on the map. I saw exactly where it is. So when
Hmm.
when I come up to Fort Worth next, I think I'm gonna have to take a swing by there just to
Yeah.
get a shot. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it's old Highway 80.
yeah, yeah. Spectacular, absolutely spectacular. Um, Stranger Things, even more spectacular. The 2 hour finale, not only did it not feel like a 2 hour finale, but it didn't disappoint at all.
Mm-mm.
All the way through the end. It was perfect. It ended beautifully, or perfectly, I should say. And that's sometimes very difficult for shows when they end, is to have a
Yeah,
perfect ending.
I loved in that season. At the beginning of the season, there is a year and a half time jump. It
Hmm.
goes from summer of 86 to uh, winter of 1987 or late fall, early winter.
Hmm.
Right. So the kids have moved a couple of years ahead in school.
Hmm.
Then you get another time jump that is another year and a half that is May of 1989.
Yes.
And
I love it that they graduated when I did.
uh-huh. Yeah, the Stranger Kids are the same age that you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're all in their 50s now.
But
Um,
I just love the fact that it didn't disappoint at all. It was,
and they played a Pixie song.
mhm. Everything about it was great. Absolutely great. And I mean, I can't say enough about it. Now, I will say this about that. I also saw that there's an ad for a cartoon that is set
Mhm.
in between the events. Uh, okay, I think we're beating that horse into the ground a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm a
I
little. Mm,
So originally the series was supposed to be called Montauk.
hmm.
And they kind of give away they're thinking about doing a series that takes place in the 90s with Hop and Joyce called Montauk,
Hmm.
which is where he goes to be a sheriff in this town and some more supernatural shit happens.
Yeah. Which I mean, that's okay if you're going to
Yeah.
have a sequel and everything, but this whole cartoon thing just seems
Hmm.
a little much. But anyway, definitely watch that. Last and not least, Wonder Man
Hmm.
On Disney Plus, the new
Yes.
Marvel TV show.
Uh-huh.
What I can say about Wonder Man is, what the ever living fuck was that?
What do you mean?
It was slow. It was painfully slow.
Yeah, there's a lot
I
of
did not
actor
like it.
jokes in there
Oh,
too, where he's
I know,
yeah.
and
And
I
I was
read it
like,
was gonna be, that, but even still, it was bad. It was not good.
I didn't think it
The
was
only
bad, but it did not hold my attention.
reason I finished it is because I started it,
Hmm.
and I had to get to the end. But
I
I
saw
mean,
the first episode. That was it.
I've been through the whole thing, and I think Ben Kingsley was wasted in it. Not wasted as in high or anything like
Yeah.
that. I just
Well, and that lead actor, I can't remember his name. He's really good too.
He is
And
good.
and
He is.
he was really fucking believable as that character. But you're right, the writing just wasn't
No,
there.
no, it's really not. It takes entirely too long to get to the payoff of his powers and everything like that. Plus, you never really get an idea what his powers are. I know because I'm familiar with the Wonder Man character in the comics, but it, so Wonder Man in the Marvel universe, just as a framework on that. He can go toe to toe with Superman.
Hmm.
He's immensely powerful. But I don't know. I mean, they set it up for a season two. I don't know that I could watch a season two, and I was very disappointed because I saw a lot of really good reviews on it, and I did see the thing that it's a lot of commentary on Hollywood, and
Yeah.
that there were some people that complained that unless you really understand Hollywood, you're not going to get a lot of the jokes, and I could see that. Um, but it was just boring. It was boring.
Yeah, it did not hold my interest.
No.
I was like, I will come back to this later. I watched the first episode and I got distracted halfway through, so I had to back it up, start again, and I got distracted again. I was like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna like this.
and you're not
Or
gonna.
it's not so much that I don't like it, it does not hold my attention, and that's bad for a superhero show.
Very much so.
Because
Very,
that's
very
kind of
much
our
so.
stock in trade.
Speaking of superheroes, so that's another thing. Just last night, I finally sat down and watched the new Superman.
Uh-huh.
Um, have you seen it?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I'll say about the new Superman. It also is a little bit of a slow burn at the first. I
Yes.
mean, there's some action and then it's a
Yes.
little bit of a slow burn.
Yes.
And so I was very concerned about it for a while. But then it really kind of picked up again and but I'll say this about that movie. It is very James Gunn. I mean, you could have put a watermark. This is a James Gunn production all over it, and it wouldn't have told me any more that it was James Gunn because it's very it's very Guardians of the Galaxy tone and
Hmm.
feel. Um, I liked it. I actually really liked it. Crypto steals the show.
Yeah.
I read places that Nathan Fillion stole the show. Crypto steals the show.
Oh, I love Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner.
He's great. He's
Yeah, he's
great.
fucking great as Guy Gardner.
Mr.
The,
Terrific
the
is
the guy
great.
playing Mr. Terrific, I was kind of pissed off about this because I really liked the guy from the Arrowverse. This guy's
Hmm.
pretty fucking good as Mr. Terrific too.
Yeah. Is that the I meant to look it up. Is that the guy who played uh the mutant in X-Men First Class, the one that could adapt? Is that same actor? I guess I need to look it up. Um,
Maybe. Yes, I think
is it
so.
okay?
Michael
Uh,
Holt.
yeah, I think so. I think so. But definitely worth a watch. I would recommend Superman, and I went into it with certain reservations because the last few Superman movies were disappointing to me, um,
Hmm.
especially because well, especially the one with Henry Cavill and what's her name? The redheaded
Yes.
lady.
To
Anyway,
answer your first question, he is Darwin
okay.
in X-Men
Um,
First Class.
but the one with Henry Cavill,
Yeah.
that was a dark Superman movie. And
Yes.
that was part of the problem I had with it. Superman is not a dark character. Superman is not ever a dark character. Yes, Superman has had things throughout his comics where he's turned and things go
Hmm.
dark for a little while, but uh, to have a movie that's that is just a very dark movie for a Superman
Superman
movie.
can't be dark because if he did, with the power he has, he would be despotic.
Well, and that's happened in the comics.
Yeah.
That has happened, but it doesn't, it doesn't last for long and everything. But I just thought it was a mistake to base a movie and not the fact that Superman himself was dark. The movie was dark. And that is not Superman. Superman is very light and very full of hope, and that's what Superman is about. You want dark, go watch Batman.
Yeah, that's what Batman's for.
Exactly, exactly.
Superman
So,
Superman is a Boy Scout. Is a Superman is Lloyd Dobler. He is optimism as an act of defiance punk rock. And they
yeah,
actually address that
yes,
straight on in the film. It's like,
yes.
well, this is punk. No, 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 no. You guys don't understand what punk rock is. There is a subsect of punk rock that is optimism as an act of defiance, and that's what that's about.
Hmm. Hmm. So overall, thumbs up on that for sure.
Yeah,
I would watch it again. It was a lot of fun, a lot of good humor in it. Um, Great. I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I watched it. I still haven't watched the latest Batman. I need to dive into that at some point, but anyway, that's all I had. You got anything else for us? You ready to kick it off?
I'm ready to get into a zonathon.
Let's do it.
So today we're going to talk about Twilight Zone, and I've picked an episode from each uh course, the pilot episode, which they did not re-release until the 1990s. But I picked an episode in each season, and there were 5 seasons, so there's 6 episodes we've got in our YouTube playlist. As a matter of fact, the entire pilot is in the YouTube playlist. If you've never seen it, it's great. Usually they just bookend it when they do a what they call a zonathon. Um, so back in the bar the podback machine, back in the 1980s, little public station television stations over Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend would do these things they called um, Twilight Zonathons, and they're all basically the same formula. They would show the entire series over a long weekend, which is how a lot of people really, really, and they did it for decades. That's how a lot of people really, really got in touch with this series, because it was originally on the air from 1959 to 1964. There is no Twilight Zone in color. It is all in black and white. Um, and in my opinion, it's actually a little better in black and white. As a matter of fact, when they brought it back the last time, they did episodes in color and episodes in black and white. And I watched all the black and white ones. The Twilight Zone, marketed as Twilight Zone in its final 2 seasons, is an American fantasy science fiction horror anthology television series created and presented by Rod Serling. It ran for 5 seasons on CBS from October of 1959 to June of 1964. Each episode presents a standalone story in which characters find themselves dealing with often disturbing or unusual events, an experience described as entering the Twilight Zone, often with a surprise ending and a moral. The phrase Twilight Zone has entered the vernacular used to describe surreal experiences. The series features both established stars and young actors who would become much better known later. Serling served as an executive producer and head writer. He wrote or co-wrote 92 of the show's 156 episodes.
No.
He was also the show's host and narrator, delivering monologues at the beginning and end of each episode and typically appearing on screen to address the audience directly during the opening scene. Serling's opening and closing narrations usually summarize the episode's events, encapsulating how and why the main characters had entered the Twilight Zone. So, Rod Serling is a writer. He is not a performer. He hated the exposition, but he felt like it had to be there. So often you would see him with a cigarette in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
um, and he's basically in a suit talking to the camera about the Twilight Zone. Like in some episodes, it would start with him talking. Most of the time, you get a little like cold opening, and then it pans over, and Rod Serling starts telling you about the episode, and then it goes right back into the episode, usually with a commercial break. And at the end, you get usually either you get Rod Serling on camera or a voiceover. You don't always get him on camera at the end of the episode. Um, he was very nervous, and he would sweat through his shirt.
Mm.
So he would have to, if he didn't get it in the first or second take, he'd have to go through a couple shirts. Because it would be, even in black and white film, noticeably soaked because he was so nervous. That's why he always had a cigarette. It kept him grounded because he was so nervous about speaking in front of people, which amazes me the way this guy writes. By the late 50s, he was a prominent name in American television. His successful television plays included Patterns for Kraft Television Theater and Requiem for a Heavyweight for Playhouse 90. He was frustrated by constant changes and edits made by the network sponsors. In Requiem, the line "Got a match" had to be cut because the sponsor sold lighters. Other programs had similar strikings of words that might remind viewers of competition to the sponsor, including one case in which the sponsor, Ford Motor Company, had the Chrysler Building removed from a picture of New York City skyline. According to the comments in his 1957 anthology Pattern, Serling had been trying to delve into material more controversial than his work of the early 50s. This led to Noon on Doomsday for the United States Steel Hour in 1956, a commentary by Sterling on the divisiveness and total lack of repentance he saw in the Mississippi town where the murder of Emmett Till took place. His original script closely paralleled the Till case, then was moved out of the South, and the victim changed to a Jewish pawnbroker and eventually became just a foreigner in an unnamed town. Serling thought that the science fiction setting would give him more freedom and less interference in expressing controversial ideas than more realistic settings. The time element was Serling's 1957 pilot pitch for a show, a time travel adventure about a man who goes back to Honolulu in 1941 and unsuccessfully tries to warn everyone about the impending attack on Pearl Harbor. The script, however, was rejected and shelved until Ben Grant discovered and produced it as an episode of Desilu Playhouse in 1958. So, I've just given you guys a lot of information. A couple of things I probably ought to explain. Early television, instead of having quote unquote commercials, what would happen is the network would sell the show to a sponsor, and the commercials only came from that one sponsor, i.e., Ford Motor Company, Parliament Cigarettes, Crest toothpaste, Colgate. Um, and they had these, and England still does this. We really don't. They would have these. It was a series, and it would be called Playhouse 90, which meant it was a show you were going to watch. It was going to be 90 minutes long. Um, so what it was basically an anthology series. We really don't do a lot of that anymore, but in early television, this was quite common. Everybody had one. In most cases, the three networks had several. Um, the show was a great success. The Desilu Playhouse in 1958, which had the time element. And it enabled Serling to finally begin production on The Twilight Zone. Per the BFI Film Classic Library, the cruel indifference and implacability of fate and irony of poetic justice were motifs for Serling. The series was produced by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, a production company owned and named by Serling. It reflected his background in central New York State and is named after Cayuga Lake, on which he owned a home and where Cornell University and Ithaca College are located. Aside from Serling, who wrote or adapted nearly two-thirds of the series' total episodes, writers for The Twilight Zone included leading authors such as Charles Beaumont, Ray Bradbury, Earl Hamner Jr., George Clayton Johnson, Richard Matheson, Reginald Rose, and Jerry Stoll. Many episodes also featured new adaptations of stories by classic writers such as Ambrose Bierce and Louis Paget, and by contemporary writers such as Jerome Bixby, Damon Knight, and John Collier. They used a lot of science fiction and fantasy tropes to get their points across, much in the same way that Star Trek did. Um, it was really easy to talk about a race war when the aliens were um, half half uh, half chromatic.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say black on one side and white on the other side because it wasn't like we think about it. It was black as in the chromatic color of black, like my T-shirt, and white as in the chromatic color white.
Right, like
Um,
like that character on Star Trek.
yeah,
What was it? Charlie X? Is that what that character was? No, I'm
yeah, it
thinking
was
wrong.
Let This Be Our Last Battlefield, I think was the
Yeah.
name of that episode. Yeah, yeah. And they to everybody else, they're looking at him, they're like, why are you guys fighting? Well, because and then you look at him and you realize that on one group of these people, the chromatic uh line is shifted. Like it's black on one side,
Mm-hmm.
and that was their whole thing. One of those actually one of those bichromatic characters actually shows up in the Star Trek uh, Starfleet Academy series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the cadets is one of those, and I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head. But the idea was We're going to deal with really serious issues that are affecting, our world. And keep in mind, this is 1958 to 1964, so there was a lot of shit happening at this point. Um, but done adeptly, where you deal with these really big ideas in 30 minutes in most cases. Now, there was a season where they were an hour. I believe it was the third season. Yeah, it was the third season. I've got some notes later on. Um, in my humble opinion, those are the best, because you get a little more time with them. They're not so rushed. But they did use these science fiction and fantasy elements for social comment as networks and sponsors who censored controversial material from live dramas were less concerned with seemingly innocuous fantasy and sci-fi stories. Frequent themes on the Twilight Zones included nuclear war, McCarthyism, and mass hysteria. Subjects that were avoided on less serious primetime television, episodes such as The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street and I Am Night, Color Me Black, offered specific commentary on current events and social issues. The other stories, such as The Masks and I Dream of Jeannie or Mr. Denton on Doomsday, were allegories, parables, or fables that reflected moral and philosophical choices of the characters. This is 19. This is early or late 1950s, early 1960s television. So season one had 36 episodes in it. Season two had 29. Season three had 37. Season four, which was the hour-long season, I'm sorry, I said three, it's four, had 18 episodes, and season five had 36. There were 157 in total. Counting the pilot, that's 158. The bulk of them were written or co-written by Rod Serling. Um, you got any ideas or thoughts on the Twilight Zone before I start going into some of these individual episodes?
Well, just the fact that the Twilight Zone has, holds very special memories for me. I of course was not alive in the 50s. I saw these in reruns later on, like I did the Dick Van Dyke Show, Green Acres, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, all that. I saw those in repeats because they were on. They were rarely on the network stations. They were always the secondary stations you had in a city. For us, that was Channel 39, um,
21, 27,
21,
33.
27, 11 at the
Yeah.
time, which 11 is now the CBS station. But these were all I don't know how to call them anything but the side stations. I don't
Side
know.
station. They were independent television
Independent
stations.
television. Thank you. Thank you. Not affiliated with the networks and things like that. And we saw network grow out of that because at one point you had UPN,
Hmm.
which was not just a local, and the WB and the CW and all that grew from these kind of TV stations. But anyway, Channel 39 used to show a lot of old TV shows. On the weekends, there was Westerns. It was a whole
Hmm.
block from noon until 5 o'clock, a whole block
Uh-huh.
of Westerns. In the afternoons, you typically got the old comedy shows. You got the Hogan's Heroes, I Dream of Jeannie. By the way, I started watching Hogan's Heroes again recently because I love that. I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, and this Twilight Zone. Um, I loved the Twilight Zone because there was always just this really the Twilight Zone was really good about starting an episode where things are kind of almost seemingly normal
Hmm.
and then they twist.
Yeah.
Something weird happens,
Yeah.
now sometimes some of the episodes start right into the weird.
Yeah.
But for the most part, even even the episode, and this is a famous episode, and you're probably going to talk about it, and I'm sorry if you're going to talk about it, but and I'll spoil it here. Burgess Meredith and his glasses episode.
All the time in the world.
Yeah,
Yes. That is one of the
beautiful.
ones I picked.
It's a beautiful episode. It's an absolutely beautiful, and I think that won awards too for that
Hmm.
episode. that's one of the ones that starts off a little not normal because it's a guy by himself in a world. Um, and so you'll get ones like that. There are episodes that start off with alien protagonists,
Hmm.
very obviously alien. And where it gets and when it turns weird is when the humans come into the episode. And that's what I really liked about the Twilight Zone. It was very weird and it was very sometimes very creepy. Um, and it was just cool for me. I myself am a very weird and unusual person. I could admit that.
You know.
And so yes, something like that attracted me very much, very much. And I love the episodes. I love how Rod Serling came into the picture after you'd had your stab for the episode, your little quick bit, and then Rod Serling would come in and give his little commentary in there, and then we would go back into the
Yeah.
show.
Rod
Uh,
Serling's commentary is usually less than a minute long, too.
yeah,
It's
yeah, but it's
quick.
great. And then you'd have his commentary at the end usually too. Um, so it was really cool. Some of the episodes are all about moral teachings.
Hmm.
You know, if you do this, this is what could happen. If you act this way, this could be the outcome. And so that's what was really cool about the Twilight Zone. And again, because it was just weird, it was unusual. Even the opening theme song is very haunting.
Creepy. It's creepy.
It is a little creepy. But for those of you who have not watched the Twilight Zone, I, I I've said things like this before, and granted, I'm not the final authority on this, but I am going to tell you for a fact, without a doubt, in my mind, if you didn't have the Twilight Zone, you would have never had X-Files, Warehouse 13, Eureka, um, uh, some of the sci-fi that came later, the whole what ifs would happen, dystopian shows, that's so big right now, like or and even books and things. You've got the Maze Runner, you've got the Hunger Games and everything like that.
These writers all watch Twilight Zone episodes.
Absolutely, 100%. I have no doubt in my mind. Someone please debate me on it, fight me. You know, I have no doubt in my mind that these people were all familiar with the Twilight Zone, and it ended up launching ideas later. One
Oh,
of
yeah.
the one of the things in today's society is no matter what TV show, movie, whatever comes out, it's probably been done before in some way. I'm not saying they're not original by any means, but something was its predecessor, something
Oh,
was
yeah.
the inspiration. And I think the Twilight Zone inspired a lot of science fiction that went
Oh,
forward.
yeah.
A
Oh,
lot.
oh, most assuredly so.
So that's my
There.
feelings on the Twilight Zone.
No, no, no. Honestly, I agree wholeheartedly. To add on to that, I would say what's great about the Twilight Zone being produced by Desilu Productions is they were looking for something else. Because Rod Serling quit doing it because I think he had like a nervous breakdown. Because again, he was working 70, 80 hours a week doing the show.
Hmm.
He did 158 episodes in 5 years. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And he was in all of them. Um, Desilu was looking for something else to do that was science fiction based. Guess what they did?
Well,
Star
because
Trek.
yes, we said it way back when, or in the very early episodes. If you didn't have Lucille Ball,
You
would
wouldn't have
not
Star
have
Trek.
Star Trek.
Yeah, and she loved the Twilight Zone.
Yes,
She really liked
yes,
it. Um, so let's talk about some individual episodes. And again, I am sorry if I did not pick your favorite episode. I picked one out of each season,
sure,
and some of these were a toss up.
sure.
Um, I did want to talk about the time element first because we didn't get to see it until the 90s. It is now part of the uh, this I want to say syndication package. That's not what it is anymore. It is now part of the set in the first season,
Hmm.
but it does have a different opening. CBS did purchase a teleplay in 1958 that writer Rod Serling hoped to produce as the pilot of a weekly anthology series, and it was called The Time Element. It marked Serling's first entry into the field of science fiction. I'll give you a little bit of plot points beforehand. 13 years after the end of World War II, a man named Peter Jensen, played by William Bendix, visits a psychoanalyst, Dr. Gillespie, played by Martin Balsam. I love Martin Balsam. Jensen talks to him about a recurring dream in which he tries to warn people about the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor before it happened. And the warnings are disregarded. Jensen believes that the dream's events are real and he travels back to 1941 each night. Dr. Gillespie insists that time travel is impossible given the nature of temporal paradoxes. While on the couch, Jensen falls asleep once again, but this time dreams that the Japanese planes shoot and kill him. In Dr. Gillespie's office, the couch on which Jensen was lying is now empty. Dr. Gillespie goes to a bar where he finds Jensen's picture on the wall. The bartender tells him that Jensen had tended bar there, but he was killed during the Pearl Harbor attack.
Which episode is this? What's the
It's
name of
called
this
the
one?
time element. We have,
Time element.
yeah, you didn't get to see it until the 90s. There's another one like that later on,
Yeah.
which we didn't get to
I,
see till the 80s.
yeah, I was going to say it sounds like a whole nother episode I'm thinking of.
Yeah. They did a lot of stuff with World War II as well. I believe Rod Serling and I know some of his writers served. Um, Plus, it was so fresh, and it was so it basically it was a turning point in our society. There's a lot of that stuff going on. With the time element script, Sterling drafted the fundamental elements that uh, define a subsequent series: a science fiction fantasy theme, opening and closing narration, and an ending with a twist. The time element was purchased immediately but shelved indefinitely. This is where things stood when Bit Grant, the new producer for Westinghouse's Desilu Playhouse, discovered the time element in CBS vaults while searching for an original Serling script to add prestige to his show. The time element, introduced by Desi Arnaz, debuted on November 24th, 1958. To an overwhelmingly delightful audience of television viewers and critics alike. The humor and sincerity of Mr. Serling's dialogue made the time element consistently entertaining, offered Jack Gould of the New York Times. They got more than 6,000 letters of praise, flooding Granite's office. I'm sorry, Granite, not Grant. Um, Convinced that a series based on such stories could succeed, CBS again began talks with Serling about the possibility of producing The Twilight Zone. Where Is Everybody was accepted as the pilot episode, and the project was officially announced to the public in the early 1959. Other than reruns of the time element was not aired on television again until it was shown as part of a 1996 all-night sneak preview of the new cable channel TV Land. It is available in an Italian DVD box set. It is different from the Twilight Zone in that the opening narration is not Rod Serling, it is Desi Arnaz, but you get to hear it. Again, I have the full episode in our YouTube playlist, so if you want to watch it, sit down and watch it. Um, it's just under an hour. The narration by Desi Arnaz is kind of awesome. Um, the program support cast features Daryl Hickman, Jesse White, Bartlett Robinson, and features Three Stooges member Joe Dorita. Um, wanted to include this one because it was the beginning. This feels and tastes like a Twilight Zone episode, even though technically it is not. Currently, it is part of the package of the Twilight Zone. It's the first one you get. Usually, what they'll do is they'll cut out Desi Arnaz's overdub and then just use like the Twilight Zone. I think fifth or sixth season or fourth or fifth season opening.
Yeah, because it looks like the official list of episodes doesn't even include that. It
No,
starts with where is everybody?
where is everybody? Where is everybody? Where is everybody? Arby's, roast beef still. Sorry, it was a commercial based on a Twilight Zone episode in the '90s, and it was hysterical. But yeah, it's one of those ones. If you've never seen it, it's got Twilight Zone all over it, even though technically it's not. The next episode I want to talk about is in the first season. It is Time Enough at Last.
Hmm.
It's the eighth episode of the Twilight Zone. This episode was adapted from a short story by Lynn Venable, which appears in the January 1953 edition of If Worlds of Science Fiction. Time Enough at Last became one of the most famous episodes of the original Twilight Zone. It tells the story of a man who seeks salvation in the rubble of a ruined world. The man in question is Henry Bemis, played by Burgess Meredith, who loves books but is surrounded by those who would prevent him from reading them. The episode follows Bemis through a post-apocalyptic world, touching on such social issues as anti-intellectualism, the dangers of reliance upon technology, and the distinction between solitude and loneliness. Bank teller and avid bookworm Henry Bemis reads David Copperfield while serving a customer. He is so engrossed in the novel that he attempts to regale the increasingly annoyed woman with information about the characters and shortchanges her. Bemis' angry boss and later his nagging wife both complain to him that he wastes far too much time reading doggerel. As a cruel joke, his wife asks him to read poetry to her from one of his books. He eagerly obliges, only to find that she has crossed out the text on every page. Seconds later, she destroys the book by ripping the pages from it. The next day, as usual, Henry takes his lunch break in the bank's vault, where his reading cannot be disturbed. Moments after he sees a newspaper headline which reads, H-bomb capable of total destruction, an enormous explosion outside shakes the vault, knocking Bemis unconscious. After regaining consciousness and recovering in thick glasses, Bemis emerges from the vault to find the bank demolished and everyone is dead. Leaving the bank, he sees that the entire city has been destroyed and realizes that though nuclear war has devastated Earth, his being in the vault has saved him. Seconds, minutes, hours, they crawl by on hands and knees for Mr. Henry Bemis, who looks for a spark in the ashes of the dead world. A telephone connection to nothingness, a neighborhood bar, a movie, a baseball diamond, a hardware store. Anyway, finding himself alone in a broken world with canned food to last him a lifetime and no means of leaving to look for other survivors, Bemis succumbs to despair as he prepares to kill himself using a revolver he has found. Bemis sees the ruins of the public library in the distance. He has these stacks of books, and the last thing he says is, "All the time enough at last, all the time I want, all the time I need," and then he breaks his fucking glasses. And it's fucking heartbreaking. The Twilight Zone often explores similar themes throughout its run. Time Enough at Last has strong thematic ties to a number of other episodes of the series, starting with that of Isolation, first explored in the series pilot, Where Is Everybody? Technically not the pilot, but as we said. The Lonely, The Mind and the Matter. It's also, it also has this idea of anti-conformity runs real heavy through the Twilight Zone. It's like, everybody's doing this. Well, you know what, motherfucker? I'm not everybody. I'm going to do my thing. But it does have a tragic ending. I kind of wish they would, I kind of wish he got his happy ending, whereas he can survive the rest of his life happily reading books.
Yeah, but
Um,
that just wouldn't have fit.
hmm, no, it was kind of dark. The obsolete man as well. Um, this guy's a librarian played by Burgess Meredith later on in a later on episode. I almost picked this one because I liked it. It's an authoritarian regime where books are basically banned. Uh, it's akin to Ray Bradbury's short story The Pedestrian and Fahrenheit 451. Um, but it's one of those episodes that it's classic. Twilight Zone. It's wonderful and beautiful and shot perfectly in black and white. I don't know. I don't know how they lit. Twilight Zone, but it's perfectly lit. And matter of fact, I was watching an old horror movie the other night with Vincent Price, The House on Haunted Hill, and I realized that they had lit that film exactly the same way that they lit Twilight Zone. And it's perfect because it'll be nice and dark, but you still see the people's faces. You know, yes, there's darkness, but it doesn't consume the entire screen. There's still a point of reference, and I love that. I love the sets for it. They never looked cheap. You know what I mean? Sometimes they were a little fantastical, but they always looked. They didn't take you out of the story. The next episode from season 2 is Eye of the Beholder, also titled The Private World of Darkness. When initially rebroadcast in the summer of 1962, is episode 42 of American television anthology series The Twilight Zone. It originally aired on November 11th, 1960 on CBS. Janet Tyler has undergone her 11th treatment, her maximum number of legally allowed by the state, in an attempt to look normal. Her head is completely bandaged so that her face is entirely covered, and her face is described as a pitiful, twisted lump of flesh by the nurses and doctors. Lurking in the shadows of the darkened hospital room, the outcome of the procedure cannot be known until the bandages are removed. Unable to bear the bandages any longer, Janet pleads with the doctors and eventually convinces him to remove them early. As he prepares, the nurse says that she will still is uneasy about Janet's appearance. The doctor becomes displeased and questions why Janet or anyone must be judged by their outer beauty. The nurse warns him not to continue in that vein, as it is considered treasonous. The doctor removes the bandages and announces that the procedure has failed, her face having undergone no change. Janet is revealed to be a beautiful woman by contemporary standards, while the hospital staff all possess a monstrous face with drooping features, large, thick brows, sunken-in eyes, swollen and twisted lips, and wrinkled noses with pig snouts for nostrils. Distraught by the procedure's failure, Janet tries to escape until a similarly attractive man named Walter Smith arrives to take her to a village. So, what is amazing about this episode is until they take our bandages off, you never see anyone's face. You hear voices, you see the backs of them. Um, when it's from the point of view of her, everything is hazy because she has bandages over her eyes. This episode, when I think of the Twilight Zone, this is the episode I think of. When, nurse? When? When can I take the bandages off? It's it's amazingly well shot. And then as she's running away, because she tries to run away, because she sees herself in the mirror and it's horrible and grotesque. Little bitty bit, there is a basically like a fascist dictator on television banging his fists on a gavel or on a on a podium talking about conformity. Um, which is why the people that look like her have to go someplace else. You don't get any more explanation on this world other than that. That's it. That's all you get. And some of the dialogue. Hey, why do the way people look shouldn't be a bad thing. Doctor, don't talk that way. It's treasonous. But that's about all you get. What do you think of Eye of the Beholder?
Well, again, it's it's a brilliant episode. Absolutely brilliant episode. You're not going to find a you're not going to find a Twilight episode that I just don't like.
Yeah. Some
Honestly.
you might like less, but there isn't one that isn't good.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There absolutely will be ones that you like more over the other. Um, but yeah, this is just a very interesting story. Um, and it's hard to put enough superlatives around an episode like this and not and be able to do it justice. That's how good the Twilight Zone was. And again, like I said very early in the episode, there is so much that we watch today that had the Twilight Zone never happened, we wouldn't have ever got. That's why I'm so glad we're doing this episode. Is just to highlight how phenomenal of a show this was. You're not going to get high CGI. You're not going to get Oscar-winning acting, but you're going to get some very good acting, some
Yes, you
very,
are.
very good acting.
Yes. They got some
Um,
good, hardcore, heavy hitting players on this
yeah,
show.
yeah. And some of the and some of the dialogue can seem a little trite,
Yeah.
but as far as the stories go and the overall theme as you go on, you're you're not going to find a bad episode.
Yeah. The dialogue has to be a little fast paced because they got to tell a lot of stuff in a half hour.
Yes. Yeah.
So some of the dialogue, as you said, might be a little trite, but it is in service to the plot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'll be damned if you don't get the best acting William Shatner's ever put on film.
Yes.
It's the best he ever was.
Mm-hmm.
Is in a couple of episodes of this. I don't think I included any of this. It was just there was other ones that I felt like we had to talk about because this one, the next one, um, five characters in search of an exit, is episode 79 of the Twilight Zone. It originally aired on December 22nd, 1961. And again, I'm picking an episode out of each season. Keep in mind, as we said before, we're talking, 36, 29, 37, 18, and 36 episodes and seasons. Or, and I included the pilot. Five characters in search of an exit. It is a very it's a very play, you know, stage direction-y kind of way to title this, which I always found fascinating. Um, a uniformed U.S. Army major wakes up to find himself trapped inside a large metal cylinder where he meets a hobo, a ballet dancer, a bagpiper, and a clown. All of them theorize widely regarding their presence here, and no one remembers who they are or how they became trapped. And they do not seem to have any need for food or water. The Major, being the newest arrival, is the most determined to escape. He is told there is no way of uh, or either breaking through or climbing up the cylinder. Eventually, the Major suggests a plan to escape, forming a tower of people, each person on the other's shoulders. However, the dancer at the top of the tower is still a few inches short of the cylinder's top, and a loud clanging sound shakes the cylinder and sends the five tumbling to the ground. The Major demands that they all make a promise to not leave the cylinder until everyone else has left. Now, even more determined, the Major fashions a grappling hook out of loose bits of clothing and his sword. By reforming the tower, he manages to grapple onto the edge of the cylinder, only to tumble to the ground outside. Inside, the clown bemoans how the Major left without them and will not rescue them if he ever returns, and surmises that the Major was right about them being in hell. Just then, a little girl picks up a doll from the snow in the dress of an army major. The cylinder is a Christmas toy collection barrel for a girl's orphanage, and all five characters are dolls. The loud clanging was the ringing of a bell used by a woman to attract donations. She tells the girl to return the doll to the barrel. The five characters, now dolls with painted faces and glass eyes, lie unmoving. The ballet dancer nonetheless moves her hand to hold that of the major's as her eyes fill with tears. I had to put this one. God, I love this episode. And even though I know what the payoff is, because I've probably seen it a dozen times in my life, it's still so fucking good. It's like, don't go out the barrel. You don't want to see what's out there. You don't want to see what's out there. It's so claustrophobic. Um, what do you think about this particular episode?
Again, I wouldn't even ask me that anymore because you're going
Okay,
to get
yeah,
the same thing
yeah, yeah.
for every single one.
You remember
They're
this one, right? Where
Oh
they're
yeah,
all, oh yeah,
yeah, I know all of these, and they're brilliant. I'm not going to be able to tell you anything new on any single future episode except for maybe one that I think you will probably have in this list. Um, because they're just you just got to watch them.
yeah, yeah.
That's what I can say.
Sit down and watch them. It's worth it. It
Hmm.
really is. It- um, the next one is quite possibly my favorite, mostly because they used a lot of sets from Forbidden Planet. It has a very Forbidden Planet feel to it. Also, a very Star Trekky feel to it. It is On Thursday We Leave for Home. It's an episode of the fourth series where they only had the 18 episodes, but it's an hour long, so they kind of stretch them out a little bit. A struggling colony on a distant planet awaits the arrival of a ship that will take them back to Earth. The story centers on the resulting cross cultural encounter and the enduring ties to one's home planet. Chiefly is seen through the eyes of the colony's leader, William Benteen, played by James Whitmore. In 1991, 113 people built a settlement on the desert planet V9 Gamma. 1991. You can tell they wrote this in the 60s. Hoping to escape the frequent wars on Earth. However, life proved difficult under the perpetual heat and daylight of two suns. So in 2021, the settlers sent out a transmission requesting transport back to Earth. The group's leader, Captain Benteen, was 15 when the expedition left Earth. Through firm authority, ardent faith, and willingness to make tough decisions, he has kept the group of now 187 men, women, and children from descending into anarchy, giving up hope, or falling victim to the planet's hazards, including overheating, dehydration, and meteor showers. Life is very hard and suicide is not uncommon. Following the discovery of another one, a young woman who has hanged herself, they bury her, and Benteen delivers a stern sermon and lecture. A meteor shower forces them into the main cave, and he again asks to tell stories about home. The settlers, most of whom were born on V9 Gamma, hang on his every word when he tells them about Earth. 6 months after the transmission of 2021, a rescue mission from Earth arrives, led by Colonel Sloan. Sloan tells them they have 3 days to prepare for the journey home. The settlers are jubilant. However, Benteen and Sloan soon begin butting heads. Benteen is upset to see that his power over the settlers is already dwindling. They're entranced by Sloan's stories of the modern Earth and disregard Benteen's warnings when Sloan encourages them to play an impromptu game of baseball in the extreme heat. Sloan implores Benteen to relax and relinquish command of the settlers, but Benteen stubbornly refuses, insisting that as long as they are on V9 Gamma, he is in command. Sloan seeks to preserve peace by agreeing to Benteen's demands and his crew be isolated from the colonists until the day of departure. When Benteen tells Sloan that he intends to position the U.S. government for a land grant so the colonists can remain together as an intentional community, Sloan is aghast at the idea and says he should discuss it with the colonists rather than assuming their approval. They disagree with him and all want to go back to Earth. Um, and then the colonists board the ship and they leave, and Benteen decides to stay by himself on V9 Gamma. Um, it's it's a dark it's a dark episode. Um, and what amazes me is William Benteen, played by James Whitmore, at the opening at the opening of the episode, he is basically a hero figure, which is how he's portrayed. But by the end of it, you realize he just wanted to be in charge. He was just lustful of power. Um, and these people basically just didn't want to live there anymore. Um, it's horrible. Even the ones that were born there. And you know, it turns out that someone sent the distress call against his orders. I believe it was the lady who hung herself in the opening of the episode. Um, it's amazing. Uh, it basically it's 50 minutes, without commercials, 45 to 50 minutes without commercials. Because again, it's an hour episode. You again, the only thing that pulls me out of this episode is the dates because they left in 1991 to go to a different planet. Yeah, that didn't happen. They sent out a call back to the planet in 2021. Yeah, that didn't happen. Um, but if you take away those years, this story totally makes sense. It has, even though it's in black and white, you're using a lot of the sets and things from where the landing site was in Forbidden Planet, which they again use several times in Star Trek. But it's amazing how you get all this stuff in play, and you go from basically from this hero character to this dictator in less than an hour. And you don't even realize that he's a dictator until the hour's almost up. Because he basically decided all of these people are going to stay here with me. And all the people went, no, we're not. You're crazy. Even though he was, a day before or 3 days before, he was their glorious leader. Um, any thoughts on this one?
Yes, the exact same I gave earlier.
Okay, here is one you might not have any thoughts on. It's called The Queen of the Nile. It is episode 143 of the American television anthology series The Twilight Zone. In this episode, a journalist becomes romantically involved with a dangerous, secretly immortal movie star. They don't show it that often. It was taken out of the syndication package.
Yeah, I was going to say this is one of the ones that I don't remember very much.
They don't show it that often. I have seen it. That's why I was like, man, how come they never show this one? It's because they took it out of the syndication package. Chicago columnist Jordan Herrick visits actress Pamela Morris, a 13-year-old woman known for her beauty and vitality. In an interview in Pamela's manor, he notices a painting of her that is dated 1940. Pamela still looks just as she did in the painting. When questioned on this, she says the painter drew her when she was a child with a projection of what she would look like as an adult, and deflects questions about her age. Pamela and Jordan flirt during the interview and make dinner plans that night. As Jordan is leaving, an old woman whom Pamela introduces as her mother, Mrs. Draper, warns him to never come back. Mrs. Draper says that she's actually Pamela's daughter. During his date with Pamela, Jordan mentions that he is from Chicago, and Pamela recalls that she had played there once at a particular theater. Jordan mentions what Mrs. Draper had said. Pamela claims Mrs. Draper is mentally ill, but after that date, Herrick calls his editor and asks her to research Pamela's first film, The Queen of the Nile. The editor reveals that the film was a remake of a silent movie filmed on location in Egypt. Leading lady Constance Taylor was apparently killed in a cave-in near the end of the shooting. The editor compares photos of Constance and Pamela in the same role and says they look alike. The editor also revealed that the theater where Pamela claims to have played was torn down 40 years earlier. Jordan asked the editor to dig up articles on every man Pamela has ever been involved with. Jordan returns to the manor and confronts Pamela with his discovery. Pamela drugs Jordan's coffee and then places a scarab beetle on his unconscious body. The beetle drains his life until he is turned to dust. She then applies the scarab to her own chest. The episode ends with another young and handsome columnist arriving to interview Pamela, stating that starting the cycle once again. In the closing narration, it is hinted that Pamela is actually Cleopatra the Seventh, and that she has lived more than 2,000 years. Um, for some reason, this was taken out. I don't know what the scene is that somebody had some problems with, but you rarely ever get to see it. But like somebody had problems with it back in the 70s. So, I mean, I'm sure it's fine. I watched it. I haven't seen anything kind of crazy. Do I have that whole episode? No, but I do have 11 minutes of it. And it's pretty damn good. In my opinion, it should fit with the others. I don't know why this one is not shown that often. That's why I wanted to talk about it. There are other episodes in the season I could have talked about, but this one in particular I like to because it's rarely ever included in a zone-a-thon for some reason, and I couldn't find what that reason was. Maybe people just don't like it. Um, but I do know that this particular episode is used a lot in the remakes of Twilight Zone because they've brought Twilight Zone back 3 or 4 times, which we will eventually talk about. Uh, this was close to the end of the series, and um, poor old Rod Serling was getting pretty threadbare toward the end. So some of the episodes in this period do not have the initial punch that the earlier episodes doing because the guy was working 70, 80 hours a week for 5 years. Like he didn't take any time off. And shit, 36 episodes, that's a lot. That's a lot to produce. Basically they were producing one every week and a half or so. That's crazy. We do not do shit like that anymore. Well, soap operas maybe. But that's basically it for the Twilight Zone, other than get out and check it out. Um, again, it's not in color. Just deal with that. It it is
Shouldn't be any problem with that.
yeah, it is
Um,
perfectly filmed for black and white. If they were in color, they would not be as good.
I don't know if it's happened in a while, but I know that every so often sci-fi would run like a week-long marathon.
Yeah.
Um, or somebody did. I think it was sci-fi, but I mean they would show them from start to finish, first
Hmm.
episode all the way through. Um, I'd
Yeah,
like to
when
see it.
sci-fi and stuff started doing that, that's when you first get the taste of again the Cleopatra episode
Hmm.
and the first one because they'll start with the first one and just do it.
The two episodes that I would have included in here, and I'll start with the first one and go to the second one. The first one I'm really surprised we didn't talk about was Nightmare at 20,000 feet, because William Shatner. Um, that's a great episode. So I would highly recommend watching that. You get a reboot of that one in the
Hmm.
Twilight Zone movie,
Yes.
and it's really, really cool and really, really good. The other one, which is an episode I've always, always loved, is in season three, A Game of Pool. I love that episode. Um, that has
Jack Klugman and
and Burgess Meredith. I think not Burgess Meredith, Jack Klugman and hang on, because I was just looking at it just a second ago.
Jonathan Winters.
Yes, and Jonathan Winters. It's a great episode. It is a great episode. So I would recommend those to give them a watch. But overall, if you can watch a marathon of the Twilight Zone, all 5 seasons, you're not going to regret it.
No.
If you like good science fiction and good what ifs, you know, uh, give the Twilight Zone a watch. Very, very well worth it.
I think they're all on Paramount right now. If it's
Fantastic.
not, yeah, if not, it's there's a free site that has them. So
If it's on Paramount, I'm about to do a Twilight Zone marathon. Um, so it's so good. So many years later. I mean, we're 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 over 50 years um since Twilight Zone came. Oh my God, Twilight Zone is almost
almost 60.
70,
Well,
almost
oh wait,
almost 70.
58 was the first episode, which
Okay,
is
okay. 50. So yeah, no, we're almost 70.
mhm.
Am I doing my math right? Yeah, I think so. I don't do math. Um, that's why I have Excel. Um, but but yeah, give a watch. I highly recommend it. Zig, find out for sure. well, here, I've got it right here where you can see it. Paramount, yes, with a subscription. Pluto TV, Paramount, Tubi, YouTube with a primetime subscription. Watch it. Just watch it.
Yeah.
That's all I can say more than anything else. Just watch it.
Doo-doo, doo-doo.
Thanks for doing this episode. I know it was one that I had recommended, but I think it's worth talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Um,
we were always going to do a Twilight Zone episode
yeah,
anyway. So,
yeah.
and we will now that we've done them, now that we've cracked the seal, we will probably do the series from the 80s, the series from the early 2000s, and the series that they just did. Um,
And
because I
I
mean,
did not see the one that they just did. I missed that completely, and I need to give that a watch.
oh yeah, but what was great is they redid some of the episodes, like uh, Terror at 20,000 Feet was one of the episodes they redid,
So then,
and
so then they've done that three times now.
yeah, yeah, because they also did it. Yeah, they did it in the movie with John Lithgow as opposed to
Yeah,
Bill Shatner.
love John Lithgow. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Sure.
With that, we'll step over to the murder side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Wikipedia, Bay News 9, WUSF, News 4 Jacksonville, Fox 13 News, and the Serial Killer Calendar was a news site I found. It's pretty cool. So this is the story of Gary Ray Bowles, or the I-95 killer.
The I-95 killer.
So this is part of my ongoing series, which is an A to Z walk through America's serial killers. I'm going state by state and case by case. I am not doing it to catalog horror, not to rank violence, but I just want to, I want people to understand how these stories began, how they escalate, and how really they're sometimes allowed to continue long before anyone intervenes. We started in Alaska, where isolation shaped both crime and response. Then Alabama, where ideology turned belief into violence. We passed through Arizona, where silence and time delayed justice for decades. In Arkansas, hesitation allowed patterns to remain unseen for far too long. In California, neglect and marginalization allowed a killer to operate in plain sight for decades. And in Colorado, documented danger was acknowledged again and again and still allowed to continue. Today, we're stopping in Florida. And with Florida, it brings us kind of a different story. This
Did we
one is
skip
not,
Delaware?
we did skip Delaware because everybody forgets Delaware. Wow, I got to do a Delaware one. I'll write that note down. Wow, Delaware. Look at me. So I guess I'm going to have to write a Delaware one and go backwards. Yay.
That's okay.
Um, that's funny. Everybody forgets Delaware.
Everybody
Uh,
forgets Delaware.
um, so this one was one that was not hidden by silence. It wasn't one that was protected by fractured systems or missing paperwork or driven by volatility, but this was one that was driven by volatility, proximity, and speed. This is a case where violence did not smolder quietly in the background. It erupted and moved, and followed people who believed they were simply crossing paths with a stranger. This story is about rage without patience, about victims whose lives intersected with someone already coming undone, and really how quickly escalation can turn lethal when nothing slows it down. So this is the story of Gary Ray Bowles, and this is Florida. We skipped Delaware. Um, so Florida is a state that's built on movement. You've got highways that cut through swamps and coastlines. You've got tourist corridors that never sleep, and cities where strangers arrive every single day and leave just as quietly. People go to Florida to disappear temporarily, sometimes to start over or to pass through or to escape something. And this matters because serial violence does not thrive only in secrecy. Sometimes it thrives in proximity, like in brief encounters or in places where lives intersect for moments and then separate forever.
You
Gary
can
Ray,
drive into the tropics in Florida
yeah,
if you go far enough.
Gary Ray Bowles did not need isolation. He did not rely on long gaps or careful planning. He relied on access, and this is what Florida gave him. So in the early 90s, Bowles moved through Florida as someone who was very easy to overlook. He was transient. He was unstable and often unemployed. Sometimes he was homeless. He drifted between cities and counties, staying with acquaintances or sleeping wherever he could, and he blended into a population that was already defined by transience. This is one of Florida's most dangerous paradoxes. It's crowded, but not anonymous. It's busy, but it's disconnected. It's full of people who do not know each other well enough to notice when someone disappears. Bowles' victims were not chosen through long-term surveillance. They were encountered, they met in bars, met through casual conversations, and they met through moments that should have ended uneventfully. Florida's social geography is what made this possible. Many of the people Bowles crossed paths with were living openly. They were working, socializing, and building relationships. None of them were looking for danger, and none of them believed they were stepping into something fatal. This is not a case where victims were hidden from view. They were very visible, accessible, living ordinary lives in a state that encourages constant interaction between strangers. Bowles' violence was very personal and it was immediate. He did not kill from a distance and he did not detach. He strangled, he beat, he stabbed, he used his hands, his body, his proximity. This is the kind of violence that requires closeness. And it also requires trust, even briefly, because there's a moment where someone believes the person in front of them is safe enough. Florida provided endless opportunities for that moment. There were bars where conversations started easily, neighborhoods where people opened doors without suspicions, and cities where no one asked why someone new was passing through. He did not stalk his victims for weeks. He did not build elaborate traps. His killings often followed arguments, perceived slights, or moments where his volatility erupted without warning. Unlike some serial offenders who rely on patience and ritual, Bowles operated in bursts. When he felt threatened, rejected, or angry, violence followed quickly. There was no cooling off period designed to protect others. When Bowles escalated, people died. Florida's size allowed him to keep moving. Its population allowed him to remain unnoticed, and its constant flow of people meant each new encounter came without context. By the time law enforcement began connecting cases, Bowles had already left bodies behind across multiple jurisdictions. Each murder lived in its own file, and each investigation began as if it were the first. Florida didn't hide Bowles, it absorbed him. As long as his violence looked like isolated incidents instead of a pattern, he was able to keep going. And this is really where the story truly begins, not with his first murder, but with a state that made proximity easy, disappearance very plausible, and the escalation was devastating. He did not arrive in Florida as a mystery. By the time his violence escalated into murder, there were already signs that something was deeply wrong. These were not subtle signs and not ambiguous ones. They were patterns of instability that have followed him wherever he went. He was born into dysfunction. His childhood was marked by neglect, abuse, and repeated instability. He was moved frequently. Authority figures were inconsistent or absent. Violence was not something he encountered later in life. It's something he grew up around. And why this really matters is because serial violence rarely emerges in isolation. It builds and it reinforces itself. And when early warning signs are ignored or unmanaged, this escalation becomes predictable. As a teenager and young adult, he struggled to maintain stability in any area of his life. He had difficulty holding jobs, difficulty maintaining relationships, and difficulty regulating emotion. He cycled between periods of relative calm and episodes of explosive behavior. He was volatile and impulsive, and he was prone to sudden rage. He struggled deeply with his identity. He moved through relationships marked by insecurity and fear of rejection. When he felt dismissed or challenged, he did not de escalate, he reacted violently. Before Florida, he had already demonstrated dangerous behavior. There were arrests, there were incidents that suggested he was capable of serious harm. None of them were treated as precursors, they were treated as isolated problems. And this is another recurring theme in serial cases. The person is seen, the behavior is documented, but the pattern is never assembled. He did not present as organized or controlled. He was not meticulous and he was not methodical in the way some serial offenders are. He did not plan months in advance. What made him dangerous was not his precision. It was proximity paired with volatility. He needed very little to justify violence in his own mind, a perceived insult, a rejection, a moment where he felt powerless. And once that switch flipped, there was no restraint. Florida only amplified that risk. As he drifted into the state, he became increasingly untethered. He had no fixed residence, no stable employment, and no meaningful oversight. He relied on temporary connections to survive, couch surfing, short term acquaintances, and people who saw him briefly and never again. It was this transient existence that really didn't slow him down. It just removed barriers. There were fewer people to notice his emotional deterioration, fewer long term relationships that might have intervened, and fewer consequences that arrived quickly enough to matter. His anger did not dissipate with time, it just sharpened. By the early 1990s, his behavior had crossed a threshold. Violence was no longer hypothetical, and it was no longer limited to threats or intimidation. It was something he acted on, and when he began killing, the pattern was immediate. These were not crimes committed under the influence of careful planning. They were eruptions. They were explosions of rage that left victims dead and investigations scrambling to make sense of what just happened. Initially, Florida law enforcement just saw individual homicides. These were arguments that had gone wrong and isolated acts of violence. They were crimes with no obvious connection besides brutality. But brutality alone does not define a serial killer. Repetition does, and that repetition was already underway. His volatility had turned lethal, and Florida's fragmentation allowed him to keep moving even as the body count grew. He didn't ease into murder, but when he crossed that line, he crossed it completely. The first known killing did not happen after a long cooling off period or careful shift in behavior. It happened very quickly, violently, and with a level of force that made one thing clear from the start. This was not an accident. It was not, and it was not situational. His victims were gay men he met through brief encounters, sometimes bars, sometimes casual social spaces, sometimes places where loneliness and vulnerability quickly intersect. These were not long-term relationships. They were short windows of trust, and that trust would end up becoming fatal. As I'd said earlier, the violence itself was brutal and personal. He did not distance himself from his victims, and he didn't rely on methods that allowed emotional separation. He strangled, he beat, he used his hands, and he stayed present through the act. And these are not about crimes of opportunity, they're about domination. This was about releasing something internal through proximity. Bowles was not trying to avoid detection, he was trying to resolve rage. The first murder did not trigger immediate alarm beyond the crime itself. It was investigated as a standalone homicide, and there was no obvious suspect and no immediate link to any other case, and nothing about the scene suggested what would come next. That lack of connection gave Bowles space, and what followed was repetition. He killed again and again and again. The locations would shift to different cities, different counties, different jurisdictions. Florida's geography all worked in his favor. There's long stretches of highway. Oh my God, I've driven through Florida. Are there long
Yeah, yeah.
stretches of highway?
Yeah, people don't think it because it's so narrow. People don't think Florida's that big, but it's basically L-shaped
Yeah.
and it's
And,
really long in both directions.
well, and you get really long stretches of highway with nothing but
Swamp,
trees and swamp.
swamps
Yes.
full of alligators.
Large urban centers are separated by hours of travel. As I had said, law enforcement agencies focused on their own cases without a mechanism forcing collaboration. Um, each victim was left behind without subtlety, and each was violent, and still the cases did not immediately connect because the victims did not know each other and because the encounters were brief. So Bowles moved on quickly, and this is how serial patterns hide in plain sight. The killings were not identical, but they were consistent in the ways that mattered. The violence was extreme, and the method required close contact, and the aftermath showed no attempt to conceal what had happened. He was not trying to make his victims disappear. He just simply left them behind. Investigators did, though, began noticing similarities, but this alone does not create certainty. Without a name and without a suspect, without shared forensic evidence that could be immediately compared, the cases remain compartmentalized. So he took advantage of that instinctively. He did not stay where he killed and he didn't linger. He moved on before questions could follow him. Florida's transient populations and tourism heavy areas created constant movement. People arrived, people left, and Bowles just blended into that motion. The murders spanned multiple locations across the state, and each one adding weight but not yet shape. To the public, these were tragic individual crimes. To the families, they were unimaginable losses, but to Bowles, they were releases. To law enforcement, though, they were still disconnected points. At this stage, Bowles was not yet a serial killer in the public sense. There was no nickname and no task force, and no press framing that suggested a single person was responsible. But the escalation was already visible. The violence did not diminish; it intensified. Bowles' attacks became more savage, and the physical damage increased. The emotional fury behind the acts grew harder to ignore, and with each killing, the chance that these crimes would be recognized as connected increased. Eventually, repetition forces attention, and once investigators began looking sideways instead of forward, the picture changed. Soon, connections started forming, and Bowles' own instability began to work against him as the pattern tightened. Serial killers are rarely caught at the height of their control. They are caught when something slips. And for Gary Ray Bowles, that slip was not a single mistake, it was accumulation. As the murders continued, the similarities between crimes became harder to ignore. Different jurisdictions were now holding files that described the same kind of violence. Victims who had been strangled, beaten, and left behind with no attempt at concealment. The level of force suggested personal rage rather than robbery or spontaneous conflict. So investigators now began sharing information, slowly at first, and then as they realized pieces were falling into place, the urgency increased. Florida's law enforcement agencies were not accustomed to seeing these kinds of murders connected across counties, but once communication started, the patterns emerged very quickly. They realized this was not random violence and that this was one person moving through the state. Witnesses then began to matter, survivors, people who had encountered Bowles and lived. Individuals who remembered his volatility, his aggression, his unpredictability. Their descriptions began to align. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Bowles was not careful with people. He did not hide his instability well. He drank heavily and he lashed out and he frightened those around him. While many of his victims did not survive to identify him, others crossed paths with him and remembered exactly who he was. And one encounter proved decisive. A woman Bowles had assaulted survived and reported the attack. Her description of him was detailed and her behavior was very distinctive. Law enforcement finally had a face to attach to the pattern. From there, the case accelerated. Investigators traced Bowles' movement across Florida. They mapped his locations and they reviewed timelines. They connected him to areas where victims had last been seen alive, and the randomness he relied on now collapsed under scrutiny. He was arrested in 1994, and once in custody, the case shifted again because this is really where many serial investigations become louder. There's confessions, media attention, and pressure. And Bowles did not resist this. He leaned into it. He confessed not to one murder, but to many. He described killing multiple men across Florida, Georgia, and Maryland. He spoke about his violence without remorse and without distance. He did not frame himself as misunderstood or tragic. He framed himself as justified. Um, and confessions are not always about truth. Sometimes they're about control. And Bowles, like many offenders driven by rage, sought control wherever he could find it. Investigators corroborated his statements with evidence. There were bodies, timelines, and location. And what emerged was a confirmed series of murders spanning multiple counties and states. These murders occurred over an 8-month period in 1994, with bodies found across states, illustrating the geographic spread of Bowles' violence along the I-95 corridor. Many of the victims were older gray men, which was a fact noted in news coverage, and what in part led him to be dubbed the I-95 killer. The first was John Hardy Roberts, who was 59. On March 15th, 1994, Bowles beat and strangled Roberts to death in Dayton Beach. After Roberts offered him a place to stay, Bowles stole his credit card afterwards. Next was David Allen
These dudes were
Jarman.
cruising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next was
Okay.
David Allen Jarman, who was 39. He was killed by beating and strangulation on April 14th, 94 in Wheaton, Maryland. Bowles then moved to Savannah, Georgia, where he killed Milton Joseph Bradley, who was 72, on May 4th, 1994, also beaten and strangled. Then on May 13th, 1994, Bowles went to Atlanta, where he killed Alverson Carter Jr., who was 47. Alverson was beaten and strangled to death after Bowles went with him to a private location. On May 18th, 1994, he traveled back into Florida to Hilliard, where he beat and strangled Albert Morris, who was 37. And finally, there was Walter Jarnell J. Hinson on November 16th, 1994, in Jacksonville. Bowles hit him with a heavy object and then strangled him. Bowles was captured shortly after this. So, all told, 6 murders were ultimately attributed to him. 6 murders over an 8-month period in 1994, and 6 lives that ended in acts of extreme violence, leaving behind 6 families who were left with questions that no confession could fully answer. The speed of his capture compared to the brutality of his crimes created a stark contrast. This was not a killer who evaded law enforcement through sophistication. He evaded it briefly through movement and volatility. Once the system focused on him, he unraveled quickly. He was convicted and sentenced to death, and unlike some cases, there was no prolonged legal ambiguity. The evidence was overwhelming, the confessions were detailed, and the violence was undeniable. In 2019, he was executed by lethal injection in Florida, and his death closed out the legal chapter of the case, but the story does not end with a sentence carried out because his crimes force a different kind of reflection. Again, not about invisibility and missed paperwork, but how quickly unchecked rage can become lethal when it moves through transient spaces. Bowles did not need decades, as some serial killers do. He did not need institutional neglect. He just needed access. And for a period of time, Florida gave it to him. The story of Gary Ray Bowles is not one of subtlety. It's not a case built on mystery or delayed recognition. It's not about a killer who hid in systems or disappeared into gaps in oversight. This is about immediacy. Bowles did not rely on patience. He just relied on volatility. And I've said this time and time again. This was on rage that surfaced quickly and violently, on brief encounters that turned fatal in minutes rather than months or years. His victims did not die because they were overlooked by the system. They died because they crossed paths with someone whose violence was already active and controlled. What this reminds us is that serial killers do not always operate the same way. Some are methodical, some are quiet, some wait for years between acts, and some, like Gary Ray Bowles, burn very hot and fast. Florida provided the conditions that allowed that kind of violence to move quickly. Transient population, bless you, constant
Thank you.
movement, large distances between jurisdictions, encounters between strangers who would never cross paths again, except once. Bowles exploited this proximity. He didn't stalk from a distance. He didn't plan elaborate scenarios. He entered people's lives briefly, became violent, and then moved on before consequences could catch him. The only thing that stopped him was not insight or foresight. It was simply accumulation. There was enough violence and enough witnesses that everything was connected. Once law enforcement focused on him, the case collapsed inward. Bowles confessed, evidence aligned, the pattern became undeniable. Um, Justice in the narrowest sense was delivered, but justice does not reverse the damage that was gone unchecked by this. It doesn't restore the trust into the moments before violence, and it doesn't answer the deeper question that this case raises. How many of these encounters felt normal until they weren't? How many warning signs were dismissed because volatility is often mistaken for chaos rather than threat? And how many victims in cases like this are reduced to circumstances and remembered as people? Gary Ray Bowles did not leave behind a legacy of mystery. He just left behind a record of brutality. Florida's place in this A to Z journey is a reminder that some of the most dangerous offenders are not ones who disappear in the background. They are the ones who move openly, violently, and unpredictably until the damage becomes too loud to ignore. So, as we continue to walk through America's serial killers, this case stands as a stark contrast to the ones built on silence and delay. Because sometimes the question isn't why the system didn't see it, it's how much violence it took before it was forced to act. Some stories linger because they were never solved, and others linger because they were solved too late. This one has a different reason because everything about it was visible: the violence, the volatility, the danger. And yet lives were still lost because the system couldn't catch up. Gary Ray Bowles did not disappear into shadows. He just moved quickly through them, quickly and violently. He left damage behind before anyone could stop him. And honestly, what remains long after the name fades from the headlines, the question remains the same. How many of his moments felt ordinary right up until the moment they weren't? And that's the story of Gary Ray Bowles.
Thank you, sir.
Can't believe I forgot Delaware. That's funny.
Everybody forgets Delaware. The only reason I remember Delaware because I was like, you were like Colorado and then Florida. I was like, wait, there's another state in between them, and I had to go look it up. I was like, oh, Delaware.
There's a Friends episode where they had to name all the states, and Ross was losing his mind because he couldn't name all 50, which was hysterical. And obviously, I would have failed at that too because I forgot Delaware.
You
So
forgot Delaware. That's all right.
we'll circle back to Delaware
Circle back.
on the next episode that we hit with this. But yeah, that's my story for today. Appreciate you sitting there through that with me. I find the fascinating of traveling across America with it interesting. I wonder if Delaware has serial killers. Maybe that's why I skipped it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, there
We'll
may
figure.
not be one for Delaware.
I'll figure. Hang on. Let's see here. How many serial killers did Delaware have? Uh, oh, there are some. Outstanding.
Hey, all right, cool. Well, I
All
mean, not
right.
cool. That's terrible for Delaware, but
Although I'm looking at that name, it sounds familiar. I may have covered this one before,
oh no.
and if that's the only one, we'll see. Um, I do have to look back at that because we are in episode 238. There's been a lot of them, and I have to look back sometimes to
248.
remember who it is. Two, two, 248? No,
Yep.
248. Yes, 248.
Yep.
I'm just getting it all wrong today.
You're fine, man. You're fine. It's a lot of shit.
It is a lot of shit. Anyway, that will take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find more about us on nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our hub, where you'll find different items about us, and you'll also find the link to our YouTube page, which they so often update.
Yeah, I cannot stress enough. Go to the YouTube page and watch that first episode. The rest of it's just seeds from the different ones I've talked about. That first episode's kind of awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you. The other thing you can find, or one of the other things you can find on our website is our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your nerdery murdery fandom, please do consider something from there. That, along with our Patreon, if you wish to become a patron of the show and help with the costs that are associated with this show, it really helps us. There are costs that are associated with our website, with our uploads, with our storage, everything that goes along with that. It does not go to our beautiful Lamborghinis, our vacation homes, and all the trips that we take. It's good to be a patron, and with the merchandise, let's face it, it looks damn good on you.
Damn good.
You can also completely for free leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information we discuss. We appreciate each and every one of you for that.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but certainly not least, as always, to our good friend Chuck. You can go sleep now.
Good night, Chuck.
Good night, Chuck. With that, I have
I have
been not Zig. I need sleep. That's what's going on here. I need sleep. I literally I think the past 2 weeks I have gotten up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's when I work on the book. That's when I work on my marketing stuff. That's when I work on work stuff. Um, this morning was no different. It's just blah.
You're all right.
So yeah, I'm good. So with that,
I have been sick with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdering.
Cue the music.